on our webinar page, so you can access all those materials once we have them up. Again, my name is Melissa Tui. I am the Director of Education at Ozobot. I'm a former teacher. When I'm not at Ozobot, I am at UCLA pursuing my doctoral degree, where I am focusing on computer science implementation in elementary school classrooms. And I'm so happy to introduce Mika Jane, one of my former colleagues. We were both founding teachers at KIPP Ignite in South LA, but I'll let Mika introduce herself and talk about her expertise in SEL.
Awesome. Hi, everyone. My name is Mika. I am currently working at a social impact agency. And before that, I was a teacher by way of Teach for America. I taught early childhood education in a Head Start in Southside Chicago. And that is actually where I really first became acutely aware of the value of social emotional learning, and specifically culturally affirming SEL. SEL that really makes sense in the context, that meets students where they are, that perhaps doesn't really go by what traditionally you see in SEL curriculum, but what makes most sense for communities. After 2 years of Teach for America and getting my master's degree in early childhood education, I moved to the KIPP Foundation, where I joined Melissa as a founding KIPP teacher. I taught art and also helped to spearhead some of the SEL initiatives that we implemented both school-wide and regionally in KIPP LA schools. And after that, I joined the Goldie Hawn Foundation. Goldie, about 10 years ago, started a mindfulness curriculum called Mind Up, which is a CASEL accredited social emotional learning program. I'll talk a little bit about CASEL in a few minutes, but her curriculum was really designed to focus on the 5 SEL competencies, specifically around mindful tasting, mindful awareness, mindful sensing, really across the board for pre-K through 8th grade students. So I am really thrilled to be part of this conversation.
Thanks, Mika. We're excited to have you today. We'll go ahead and jump right in. We have some introductory questions for Mika, just for those of you who may not be as familiar with SEL. Or actually, I'm sorry, one more housekeeping item before we jump into the webinar. We are actually going to give away a educator entry kit today. So please feel free to go to the Google link that Cassandra has posted in the chat. You can also go to ozo.bot/giveaway to enter to win an educator entry kit. We are asking that each person only enter once, and we will announce the winner at the end of the webinar. But we'll jump right in and start asking Mika questions. How did SEL become a household name in the education space?
So I wanted to actually start even before getting to this first question by just having everybody take a moment to check in with ourselves. A lot of SEL work is actually introspective and really about our awareness of how our bodies are, how our minds are, how our emotions are. So if it helps, you can stretch or notice your breathing. You can scroll Instagram for a minute. You can drop your shoulders. There are a lot of ways that that people check in with themselves, and I just encourage you to take a second to do that, whatever it works for you. And so starting with this first question, how did SEL become a household name in the education space? I always like to say that SEL is another way to frame character development. And I use that because our emotions not only are just such a primal instinct, but when we think about what we're sharing with students around emotional intelligence, around self-awareness, self-management, responsible decision-making, conflict resolution, these are all actually very much in the bucket of character development, which is what most schools will put. It has gone from being a want to being a need. I know, Mel, you'll remember this from our days at KIPP, but not only is social emotional learning so valuable to students, but it's also extremely valuable to educators. and anyone who's interacting with the child. So when we think about mindfulness techniques that we can integrate before something escalates or before there even is conflict in the classroom or in the playground or anywhere around the ecosystem of the child. SEL is preventative, but it can also be used in the kind of early intervention period. And so I definitely know that there are people whose the hill that they will die on is SEL, and it the major focus right now in the space in the education industry is on making sure that it's culturally relevant. So I'll give an example of that. In a lot of traditional SEL curriculum, you'll find that sitting crisscross applesauce spoons in our bowl are in our little square on the rug is a way that students show that they are attending, that they are participating. But the reality is that is an SEL competency that was created many years ago based on a very specific population of students. And that it doesn't mean that if a student is standing up or wiggling a little bit on the rug, I'm specifically talking about young kids, but it doesn't mean that they are not attending or that they're not emotionally synced with the classroom or with the teacher. And so there's a lot that's being done right now during this year of racial reckoning and the movement to making schools more equitable that SEL is a big part of.
Great. And traditionally, how does SEL get integrated into schools?
So CASEL has multiple recommendations for how to get into schools, but my humble opinion is that you have to have a teacher who is championing SEL within the school building. Kids don't care what a teacher knows until they know the teacher cares about them. And as soon as you find one educator who is really going to make SEL a priority, other classrooms will follow. I'll give the example of a teacher actually who Melissa and I worked with, who made it a priority to do shout outs and accolades before the end of each school week. And it wasn't to shout out only certain students. She was able to embrace every child and include every child in this. And it not only made a huge difference in her management of her classroom, but it spilled into her grade level and then eventually became a school-wide initiative. And it really didn't require curriculum at all. It was just something that she championed. And eventually, we were able to create lessons that kind of developed further on that concept. But another way that SEL can be integrated is through school-wide implementation. And what this typically includes is training for the entire staff, training that includes both, a deep dive into what SEL is, but then most importantly, what does it look like in action in the classroom? What competencies are, what are we trying to train educators on? What does it look like for a student to be really embracing SEL, and also how to collect data on it. Panorama Education is a great example of an organization that not only focuses on SEL implementation, but also on capturing data so that they can use it in reports, in student-teacher conferences, about how both students feel, their safety, their capacity to learn, their interest and engagement, but also for the educator, how a particular curriculum might have impacted their ability to teach and their children's ability to learn.
Thank you. And how has the pandemic affected SEL in the classroom?
Yeah, so this is, an ongoing question, but COVID-19 has compounded the adversities that students are facing, as you all know. And I think that a lot of educators have really focused on SEL because that's the biggest and best way to connect with students. No learning is going to happen, right, unless that connection and that safety is there. And I've seen a lot of organizations pivot to getting grant support for SEL implementation, and even sending curriculum guides to educators' homes or in their home environments to say, if there's anything that you do, try to help your students feel grounded, feel that they have the supports that they need, be it for young kids, because that's the age group I used to teach. I'll share a couple of examples. Like a glitter jar can be a great tool. It's a calming jar with glitter glue and water, and it's just a sealed cap. But when you shake it up and you let the glitter fall, students will watch that and just feel a sense of calm. And that doesn't necessarily mean that they weren't calm to begin with, but again, it can be used as a preventative tool. There are also other techniques like writing in a gratitude journal, or having students use a Hoverman sphere as a breathing ball, like a visual technique that can be done virtually or in person. Just simple ways to help ground the classroom as they get ready to learn.
And what are your thoughts on the SEL kits?
Yeah, so this actually goes hand in hand with the train the trainer model, which train the trainer is essentially the idea that you can find a champion in-house at a school or at the district level who is really going to champion SEL and help implement it across schools or across the grade levels in a school. And I personally think that as a school embeds these values into the school community, SEL is no longer a separate lesson or a separate activity or a part of the day. It is embedded into the fabric of the school community. And kits can be helpful and useful if teachers are properly trained on how to use them. Otherwise, a curriculum guide will collect dust on a shelf somewhere, or you might have one professional development opportunity, but if a teacher misses it or an educator misses it, they miss that information and the opportunity to implement it in their classroom. So some of the kits that I've seen that have been very effective are having like a mindfulness or an SEL corner in a classroom where things like the glitter jar or like the Velcro breathing, sheets might live. And for older students, of course, there's a lot more that students can do on their own when prompted with writing activities or community engagement activities that show not only emotional regulation, but SEL in the community. But I do think on the whole, if kits are not integrated in every classroom, you'll have posters in one classroom and you'll have students who are super engaged and involved in the SEL curriculum. And then the classroom next door may not have anything going on, even if that kit is in that room.
Great. And I know, Mika, you mentioned you wanted to talk about this video in particular. Would you like me to play it, or did you want to take over screen share? What's your preference?
Mel, I would love for you to share it, but I'll actually just give a quick
Sure.
overview about what this is. So adverse childhood experiences are traumatic experiences that a child may have between the age of 0 and 18. And they're actually so common that 2 out of 3 US Americans have an ACE or an adverse childhood experience. And there's a CDC Kaiser study that came out in the 1990s. It was done with Kaiser San Diego. And this is where a lot of the research has been done on ACEs. And the fascinating part about this is the study group was actually on 17,000 participants, 70% of whom are white and college educated. And everybody had access to healthcare. So we're talking about a pretty specific population of people who were part of the study. And that was the actual groundbreaking study that showed that 2 out of 3 people had an ACE. And so I share this because often we think that childhood adversity may be specific to a particular community or individuals who are farthest from the opportunity. And not only is that not true, but it is compounded and the intersectionalities of all the other challenges that marginalized communities may face, that they can actually exacerbate ACEs and make it a something that lasts throughout our whole lifetime, both physically, emotionally, mentally. And so the video that Melissa will share is a collaboration between the Surgeon General of California, Dr. Nadine Burke-Harris. She is the second Black female Surgeon General in the United States, and her signature issue is adverse childhood experiences. And her goal is to cut ACEs in half in one generation, which is a huge, huge big initiative. And I think that social emotional learning has an incredibly important role in this, because we know that ACEs are preventable, and social emotional learning helps to cultivate the understanding of who we are in our ecosystem of our family, in our school, in our community, and how to actually make the connection between ACEs and childhood adversity and the healing process, so that they are no longer passed down generation to generation. So with that, Mel, I'd love for you to share the video.
All right, I'm going to click play here and hope that you all are able to see and hear my screen.
Dr. Nadine Burke-Harris says, adverse childhood experiences are where the hope lies. And I can't help but to think of those whose stomachs hold storms of story from their youth, of nature versus nurture, of fight or flight. Its experience is an ACE that tells a story of surviving, that affects our brain, immune system, even our DNA. It can seem wild and overwhelming to give these feelings a name. Some don't know how to approach the flame, address the light. All the humans, all the heroes that have lived through so many ACEs, now help has been provided to this nation regardless of the rain you trust through. This test can teach you about prevention, provide you with treatment, help guide you to a rainbow. For we are so much more than the tornado. We contain both sunshine and soil. For each ACE is a seed. There's a flower within you. There's a garden within us. Be a part of this movement. All we need is courage. All we need is you.
Wow.
Thank you.
So this video was actually of a poet from South LA. Her name is Naire. She's 16, and she wrote this poem as a kind of collaboration, both with spoken word and information about adverse childhood experiences and how they don't define you, but they are an opportunity to recognize your past and to write your next chapter. And I think that SEL ties in very closely with this, because without the awareness of who we are and our individual capacities to manage conflict, to mindfully think before we respond or react to something, it's really hard to comprehend ACEs without the SEL kind of layer that foundation. And I also, I just think that having taught art and looking at STEAM as a broad kind of way to engage with students, that SEL really fits into every department, into every subject. It isn't its own separate thing. And a lot of schools do have it as a separate kind of subject, but I really encourage all of the teachers and educators who are part of this webinar today to think about how the 5 SEL competencies really can embed themselves into the 5 areas of STEAM, which I know Melissa will talk a little bit about as well.
Great. And Mika, I know those were all the main slides. Were there other things you wanted to share before we jump into the Ozobot integration content?
Nope, that's it.
Okay, great. So I know a lot of you here are interested in how Ozobot can be integrated with SEL. We actually have, I'll be honest with you, Mika is a good former colleague of mine, and I know that she's an expert, and we also have certified educators on the Ozobot, in the Ozobot community that have submitted lessons in our lesson library, which I'll be going over, but ideas for classroom implementation with Ozobot. Something that I came up with is that Ozobot uses these color code markers, and even giving young children or even older children the opportunity to use the markers to pair with their breathing, to do mindfulness breathing activities, is one effective way to help with self-regulation, to create a calming activity. There's also ways to use the bot to go through the design thinking process and to really think about empathy and empathize with another user. Students could create a map for when their classmates have different feelings. These could be pooled as a resource in the classroom. So if students are feeling sad or happy or scared or frustrated, they could go and pull another child's map to be able to use that bot and to integrate and utilize that with the Ozobot for when they need that. So there's a lot of really, really creative ways to use these lessons. What I'm going to show you is our Ozobot lesson library, where you can find our certified educator lessons that I'm going to show you in just a second. Ozobot Classroom is a free platform for those of you that have not been to classroom.ozobot.com yet, but you can sign in. And in our lesson library, we do have a subjects filter where there is an SEL filter in digital citizenship. What I'm going to share about is some of the SEL lessons that we have in our lesson library. We have, as of right now, 39 SEL lessons, along with hundreds of other topics and content areas. And our certified educator, Jesse Erickson, has 2 specific SEL lessons in our lesson library. Again, this slide deck will be shared with you. So if you want to revisit this and look at the lesson plans, you are welcome to do so. But she created a lesson. She actually teaches at I believe, a school that serves military families. And so she has a lot of kids that are in and out, and they're not there for, maybe they're there for a year or 2, and they're just experiencing a lot of change and transition in their elementary school lives. And so she created one lesson called Memory Maps, where she could have her students process grief and mourning through positive memories. And what she did was she front loaded with a brain pop video, had a discussion, and then had her students create maps where they drew special happy memories. So for example, I believe one of these is a dog of a student had a dog that passed away. And so the student drew different happy memories with their dog, and then had the bot follow along the path, and then use color codes to mimic some of the emotions and behaviors as well. So that's one really effective and creative way that our certified educators have created lessons. She's also created a lesson. The timing was really great for avoiding viruses. I believe she created this right at the beginning of the pandemic to teach her students about just citizenship and being respectful of others and washing your hands and doing other things that to keep communities safe. And she integrated this with Ozobot, and then again front-loaded information with brain pop videos, and then had discussions and had her students create avoiding viruses maps. She really focused on self-management to regulate her students' emotions, to teach them how to regulate her students' emotions. She created happy maps with her students and used Ozobots to integrate as well there. And then from there, they built on their happy maps by creating a happy dance for their Ozobots. So they used Blockly to create happy maps. And we actually have a full webinar where Jesse actually goes very deep into detail of how she presents all of this, how she teaches it, and how she implements it. The recording, we do have the recording, the link to it in the slide deck, so you're welcome to visit that and review that if you're interested in incorporating SEL with Ozobots.
Mel, can I add one thing?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I love the idea of the savoring happy experiences and allowing students and educators to go back into a time that brought them joy, and to not only savor it, but to either write about it or use Ozobot to help recreate it, because it actually does increase dopamine levels, and it brings you it gives the body that big boost of happiness that almost reflects the actual happiness you may have experienced when that event occurred. And there are numerous studies that show the value of this. And it kind of gives a new meaning to the stop and smell the roses, really pausing to like have that time of joy, and then also to be able to recall it.
We've also, yeah, thank you for that input, Mika. That's wonderful. And it's so important. Those are the little things that often go overlooked in classrooms that are so important, that not only build community amongst students and teachers and amongst students themselves. It's so important now, especially with the fact that a lot of students haven't been in the classroom, they haven't had that connection, and needing to have that recognition from others and being able to identify that themselves is so important for students. So thanks so much for bringing that up. Other lessons in our lesson library include International Day of Happiness, and then all these other lessons that are listed here that you're welcome to search for in case you were looking for SEL lessons in the lesson library. And there are a couple examples of SEL integration from the Ozobot community. These are pulled off of Twitter, but you can see here that these students decided to use color codes to mimic different emotions and how they were feeling. Here they created a fabulous friend machine, and recounted emotions and told a story throughout the color codes. And then connecting literature and STEAM, students retold different parts of a story. And then they also were challenged with writing on their papers. And you can actually see how engaged the students were with how much writing they have in that area, because they were asked to describe the emotions of the characters during that time. I know that when I was in the classroom, getting students to write a significant amount was always like pulling teeth. So just the fact that that student looked so happy, so engaged, and was able to write that amount just speaks volumes to how Ozobot is helpful in engaging and helpful in helping students really think about and reflect on what they've learned. And then this is one of my favorites. Let me see if it'll open up the Twitter feed here. This one was super creative, where students used I guess like tape-ons onto the Ozobots, and the Ozobots are actually underneath and going around and traveling in a circle. So they made this 3D projection of what a certain emotion looks like. So that was super, super creative. Great. So Mika, do you have anything else you wanted to add about SEL, or what teachers can do and think about during this time?
Totally. I think going all the way back to the first activity that I just kind of prompted around taking a moment for ourselves, I think there's an important connection between mindful awareness and the first SEL competency, which is really all about awareness of how we are feeling in the present moment. And the mindfulness part of it is really just without judgment. That's really like being able to assess what you're feeling before you react to something. And there are countless numbers of stories of students who have used this technique and then who haven't, but also for educators, for all of you who are navigating this tumultuous year of having to reinvent your job and basically, manage classrooms entirely remotely for many folks. I just want to give you for you to celebrate the ability to do this job and to do it well, and to have made it to this tail end of the school year, and using kind of celebration and mindfulness as a way to kind of recharge over the summer, as we prepare for this next school year, because we know that it's going to have its own set of challenges, but being able to celebrate and to recognize and reflect on this year, that's part of the kind of the tail end of the SEL CASEL competencies, which is responsible decision making and looking at what has worked and what hasn't worked, what we can lean on, who are, within our teacher networks and our school community. So just something to kind of throw out there as we kind of end this school year.
Yeah, great. Thanks so much. So it looks like we have some really great questions in the Q&A. Crystal says, love this. Where can we learn more about ACEs and how we can support students who experience them?
Yeah. So there are a couple of places. One is ACEs Aware. I'll actually, as the next question is asked, I'll drop some links in the chat, but another one is numberstory.org. And the theme of numberstory.org is knowing the story behind your number. And what I like to say about ACEs is that they don't define us. They are a part of our lived experience, but for many people, you go through life knowing that this is your journey. And when somebody tries to quantify it or put labels on it, it can feel very triggering, and it can really push people into a bad place. And so I never want for people to say like, I have an ACE score of a 3 or I have 9 ACEs. That's really not the purpose of having the number, but really it's to understand where we are, like what's our starting point, what got us there, and then what's the next chapter. So that's kind of the theme behind Number Story, knowing the story of your number. And also something that my current agency, the social impact agency that I work at, one of our goals for one of our clients is actually to bring ACEs awareness into doctors' offices, into pediatric spaces, into schools, so that we can actually train educators not only on the preventative and kind of whole school social emotional piece, but also what has happened to our students before they even arrive. How do we actually kind of screen for that so that we know what they might be carrying, which, for Melissa and me, I don't remember, Melissa, if we ever received training on ACEs, but how valuable it would have been had I known, and had we known some of these very simple buckets of abuse and childhood neglect, and a parent with substance abuse, or a family that's experienced divorce. I mean, these are very, very common situations that students can be put in, whether it's in the home environment or the school environment. Again, it's anything traumatic that happens to a student between 0 and 18. And it really can impact emotional well-being.
Yeah, I completely agree with everything that you said there. I know we really focused on trauma-informed teaching practices, but that was something I always felt like I could do more of, yet didn't necessarily know that I had the right training or background or expertise for that. But I agree with you 100% that had I known this as a context and a background, it'd be something that would have been really helpful for my teaching practices. Yusef has the question, how can teachers incorporate SEL strategies in remote learning?
Oh, well, I guess my follow-up question would be what age group, but I'll give kind of a couple of examples, starting with young students around, pre-K to second grade. I used with younger students a warm and fuzzy jar, where you have the visual of a colorful cotton ball. And for every action that you notice that a student takes, whether it is using the chat feature to send an emoji to another student, or seeing another child looking at a student on Zoom and smiling at them, you know, showing that they are participating in learning. I would add a little cotton ball to the jar so that they saw the visual of the jar filling up with colorful cotton balls. And an important piece to this is that the goal is not just to reach the top of the jar, but it is to create a safe community, one where students feel that they're being heard. So I recommend not taking out cotton balls if you see a negative behavior or something that doesn't qualify as a emotionally aware choice, because we're not saying we can take these things away, but we are saying let's shine on and celebrate good choices that students make, whether it's listening to a friend or helping someone navigate a difficult situation. So that's, I mean, that's a little bit harder to do remotely, but I think that visual is key. Now, with older students, I really think that talking about the brain science, about the different parts of the brain, I think that's really, really valuable. You can talk about the amygdala and fight, flight, and freeze response. You can talk about the decision-making part of the brain, you know, judgment, how we look at certain situations and how we respond to them. Um, there are actually brain posters that are part of the Mind Up curriculum, which I referenced a little bit earlier, that have a picture of a brain with the three different parts that are the focal parts for the, you know, for the purposes of SEL, and ways to teach it to kids. And there's, you can do a whole unit on this. Yeah.
Great, thank you. Chris has a question. Are there any tips or activities you have for encouraging SEL over the summer?
My gut response is books, books, books. You know, and there are SEL books for every grade level, about introspection, about reflection, about community engagement during the time that school is off for the summer. Um, and there are actually, like, I'll drop some links in the chat. Melissa, is there a way for me to also share some resources after the webinar?
Yeah, we can plug those links directly into the slide deck, and then that way those resources are there. I think maybe on our wrap-up slide we can add them in there.
Perfect, perfect. Yeah. So I'll actually send some links for SEL focused books that are grouped by age group. So if you, you know, if you're working with high school age students, you won't be using kind of the I am me type of, you know, books, but there's so many opportunities for kids to engage in reading over the summer that will help them to stay connected to SEL, and also to prime them for another year that's bound to be a little bit challenging. Other examples for using SEL over the summer would be, for young kids, I would say if they have like some sort of like a classroom teddy or like a classroom mascot, to have it be one where students can engage with it. It can be like through email or through talking to a teacher or to a friend, and using that mascot as kind of a community builder. It's much easier to do when the child can actually take it home and have it, and kind of like do role-playing activities of being in a situation where there's conflict, and what do you do, how do you respond to the little mascot, and then using those role-playing activities in real life with students, and doing kind of, you know, student A said this, student B, how would you respond, and using kind of like conflict resolution and peace paths type of kind of just like the back and forth, but using it first on an inanimate object to help students kind of do that like as a playful activity.
Yes, and it looks like Mary is chiming in as well with some really great suggestions, just saying going outside, sitting down, draw what you see in front of you. Is there anything that makes you smile? What are you sitting on? How does that feel? Do you notice any animals, what are they? I think just having that awareness of your body and your surroundings, absolutely, Mary, are a great way to engage students and have that reflection time to be in touch with their emotions and their body.
Yeah, I love the you know, like write or draw what you notice, like in your external environment or even when you first wake up. Another thing that students can do, and if an educator feels compelled to do it, you can actually create a video of yourself doing this first, but doing a quick body scan, starting with the top of the head, pulling your head up and lifting your neck so that you're alert and in a straight position. So that, even just that, shifts the idea of like sit up straight to here's how to sit up straight and here's how to do it in a way that feels right for the student. And then moving towards the forehead area, looking at the eyebrows, are they furrowed? Moving towards the jaw, are they tense? If so, moving them around, lowering your shoulders, like doing an entire face body scan or even full body. And if you are not feeling like you want to film yourself doing that, there are so many YouTube videos of this that you can just send to kiddos to do, or you can screen share it so that everyone can do it together. But it's like simple breathing activities that are masked as something fun or a movement activity, but really are at the end of the day, breathing.
All right, great. It looks like, let's see, what other questions we have. Yusuf is asking if Ozobot works with any markers. We do have our Ozobot branded markers that will work with Ozobot, but any colored markers will work as long as the pigment is similar to in color to our blue, green, and red colors and black. Crayola markers will work, washable markers will work. We do recommend to stay away from dry erase markers because those have, when they wipe off, they have residue that can get up into the wheels and the gears of the Ozobot, which can affect the performance of the bot. So any washable marker would work with the Ozobot. Great. I think those are all our questions in Q&A. So sorry, I think somebody is at the door. My guard dogs are alerting us in the background, so I apologize for the barking. But I think we are ready for our giveaway. And while we do that, if you have any other questions, please feel free to post them in Q&A or in the chat. So with that, Cassandra, do we have the numbers that we are choosing from for the giveaway?
My dog might bark too.
Maybe they're talking to each other. Maybe they...
Let me pull it up. We have, where's my tab? Okay, sorry. Yes, we have 2 through 25.
All right, Mika, as our special guest today, please pick a random number 2 through 25 to choose our giveaway winner.
Okay, my number is 2.
2 is Diane Robinson. Yay.
Congratulations, Diane. If you could email Cassandra at ozobot.com to claim your prize, we will get you the educator entry kit as soon as we can. Congratulations, great. So just to wrap up, first of all, we want to thank Mika for spending the time with us to enlighten us around this really, really important just topic of, I know I learned a lot today. I'm sure our audience members learned a lot today. And it was great to be reminded that there are other priorities in the classroom that are not necessarily academic. For those of you in the audience, if you would like your PD certificate, you can email support@ozobot.com. If you would like updates, you can opt in with your email address on ozobot.com. And then if you want to follow Mika on Twitter, she's at Mika Jane. And we'll be updating this slide with some of the resources that Mika mentioned. So you can always come back and refer to it on our webinar page. So thank you everyone for joining us. Have a wonderful summer and we will see you all soon. Stay safe and healthy out there. Have a great day, everyone. Bye.
Thank you.